Okay. Wow, what a quick conference this has been. But it's been full of quality presentations and workshops. We hope you've all enjoyed this, especially the exhibitors, the virtual library and public forum and virtual lounge that was presented. By the way, all these will be available for you until October 20th, so just sign in to enjoy and learn. Be patient though, as we format all workshops and plenary sessions, and we'll send you a follow-up email when these are available and how you can access the recording. There is a conference evaluation in the forums section of the conference site, and we need you to complete the evaluation today. We'll have an evaluation QR code listed at the end of the plenary for you as well. So we'll make sure you have that information. Speaking of QR codes, let's find out who won the QR quest as we look at our QR scoreboard on the conference homepage. And we've noticed there are several top scorers. However, there is one person, the winner, Mr. Ben Schumann of the Boys and Girls Club of Parkersburg, West Virginia, that scored 664,700. Congratulations, Ben. An iPad will be ordered and sent to you very soon by the West Virginia State After School Network. Wow, he found all of them. Great job, Ben. Finally, we have an entertaining and insightful keynote for you for the closing event. There's no doubt that in these times, unprecedented times, we need good information and knowledge about what we can do to help eliminate the stress. Dr. Harris will explore the potential impact of recent events personally and professionally and explore self-caring strategies to improve our overall capacity during this time of challenge and uncertainty. Dr. Jim Harris is the Associate Director of the West Virginia Autism Training Center at Marshall University and the owner of Opportunities Consulting Services. He's worked with children and families throughout his career as an early interventionist, a parent educator, education consultant, and behavioral health therapist. Dr. Harris has presented at a variety of conferences from the local to the international levels on such topics as behavioral intervention, parenting positive behavior support, trauma-informed care, organizational change, and many, many more. He's worked with a variety of public and private entities, including the Fred Rogers Company, the United States Department of Education, the Ohio Association for Education of Young Children, and many, many more. It's my pleasure at this time to introduce to you Dr. Jim Harris.
Thank you, David. Appreciate it. I want to switch over here to share. All right. Everybody should see one slide, and we'll jump in and start. We got really what a privilege to be a part of closing up this conference. You know, David and I were just talking, and it sounds like the conference has gone really well. I was just astounded by the when Sherry and Susan were talking about the number of folks that are that registered. You know, over 800 folks, and what a great turnout, in uncertain times, but we're doing what we can with what we've got. So my privilege and pleasure to be a part of closing the conference. I've spoke for many, after school conferences, out of school conferences through the years all over the country. And I'm happy to be a part of the Multistate conference this year as well. First of all, I have to really appreciate David, everybody in his office, giving me the opportunity. I really appreciate Susan and Sherry and all they've done, and the remainder of the West Virginia Department of Education's team that worked so hard to put this on. So, this is one of those topics, we're talking a lot in our office at the Autism Training Center and our West Virginia Behavior and Mental Health Technical Assistance Center about just-in-time information versus just-in-case information. And just-in-time information is where we're really focusing. We have a Behavior and Mental Health Technical Assistance Center that is product of a collaboration between the West Virginia Department of Education and the Autism Training Center. And we support schools as they work to support students and behavior and mental health needs. And one of the things we're talking a lot about right now is we don't want to send people just in case information. We don't want to send people information about, concepts and ideas that they can't use right now, because right now we're all in a state of what's right in front of us. And I think this is one of those presentations that's a just-in-time information presentation, because stress and self-care is critical for us right now to develop a better understanding, to take on a stronger ownership of our psychology. But let me be real honest and clear with you about this, that my disclaimer is the presenter of this content is a profoundly flawed human that struggles daily with stress and self-care. So all joking aside, I mean, that's legit. I mean, stress and self-care is something that I'm always working to understand and apply more effectively. I'm always trying to figure out how to fit this, how to understand concepts about why we do what we do, what makes humans function at the highest level, and apply those things in my life. And there's some days where I do a better job of that than others. And today I'm just going to kind of share with you some of the things that I found to be helpful. I'm also going to give you a little different angle when it comes to understanding my perspective of what self-care really means, and how that impacts our ability not only to be more effective, more effective with the students and the young people that we serve, but more effective with our families, and also to feel more comfortable in our own skin. So the first thing we have to look at is that stressed and traumatized brains function differently. So what that means is everybody right now is in a different place. Everybody's brain, because, and I'll talk about the pandemic has affected folks in different ways, but it's fair to say that everybody is in a different state than they would be if this was a regular fall 2020. We know it's not a regular fall 2020, so we know our brains are functioning differently. Now, but what we want to do is unpack what that means. Like, what does that actually mean, stressed and traumatized brains function differently? Because one of the things I find is people can get, they'll start talking about stuff and they talk right up to the problem, but they don't talk any further. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk beyond the problem towards more effective solutions. So the first thing we have to understand when we try to unpack the idea of why stressed and traumatized brains function differently is to understand the basic functioning capacity of the brain and the basic purpose of the brain. So ever since you were a baby, your brain's been observing the environment, and it's been looking around, and it'll say, oh, look, there's A, and there's B, and there's C, okay? And then it'll observe longer. All right, there's A, there's B, and there's C, okay? And then with time, what starts to happen is even the baby's brain starts to go, okay, there's A, there's B, and then we anticipate, prepare for, physically and psychologically, we prepare for what's next, which is C. So the real big part of understanding what our neurology does is its pattern recognition and pattern storage in order to predict the future and be successful in the future. And what that pattern storage and pattern recognition is, the scientific term, is developing internal working models. So we develop a map or a model of what the world is like and what we can expect from the world. So what we can anticipate from the world. And it's kind of like we start to learn the field and the rules of the game. So we learn how to be successful at the game. And the rules change and the field changes. As we know right now, the field has changed and the rules have changed. But, if I could simplify a very direct way of understanding what success can be, it's developing a functional and effective working model of the world, and then executing behaviors that helps you to be successful in that model. So that's what our brain's constantly trying to do. First of all, let's stay alive. Second of all, let's thrive. So I want to stay alive. So I want to know patterns. I want to know about when I should be looking for a bus or when I should be putting the brakes on in my car. And I want to thrive. What that means is, how can I add the optimal value to society? How can I feel, how can I be more to people in my life and things like that? So that's where those internal working models come into play. Now, there's this other side. So where when the models that we've built don't always predict the future, or we can't seem to build a successful model to predict the future, this is where anxiety comes in. So let me teach to you this way. So if you've got a toddler and this toddler is sitting at their table, okay, and they've got their sippy cup and they drop their sippy cup. The parent comes over, picks up the sippy cup, puts it on the counter, okay? Kid, all right, that's noted. So if you got a toddler worth their salt, they wait till the parent goes back, the parent sits down, gets a bite of food, the toddler takes a sippy cup, drops it again, looks at the parent. Parent comes over, picks it up, puts it back on the counter. What am I doing? I'm pattern testing. That toddler's pattern testing. what happens when I drop the cup? And if they get enough trials of that, enough predictable trials of that, what they start to do is they start to go, all right, I can feel comfortable. I can feel safe about what this pattern means and my ability to respond to that pattern. Now let's take another, let's show you how anxiety shows up. So now I've got a kid, a toddler, they drop the sippy cup, okay? Someone comes over, picks it up, puts it back on the counter, okay? Again, they wait for the parent to go back, sit down, they drop the sippy cup again. Then this time though, the parent comes over, yells, screams, cusses, throws the cup in the sink. Now we have anxiety. Why? Because I don't know what's going to happen when I drop the sippy cup. I don't know what to expect. So my anxiety is the emotion or the energy, and that's a whole other talk. It's the energy and emotion of the unknown about I don't know what to expect from the future. And if you have too much of that in your life, what starts to happen is, and we'll unpack different ideas around it, but as the world becomes more unpredictable, as the world becomes a place that's harder to navigate, we can enter into this state what's called regulatory fatigue. And regulatory fatigue is simply as it sounds. Like the world is so much to take in. It's so much to guess about. There's so much anxiety that I feel like I'm out of energy. There's nothing for me to do. I can't regulate myself in that way. And so now what we start looking at is, what does COVID mean in this situation? Like how does COVID factor into this? Well, it makes perfect sense when you start talking about anxiety, right? Because what has it done? It's taken a lot of our certainty. It's taken away the ability to predict the future in a lot of ways. And I'll talk more about stress and how stress works in just a second. But what COVID has done when we start looking at this idea as it relates to stress is it's taken away some of our maps. It's taken away some of our models. So one of the things I want folks to understand is what our psychology is trying to do with the anxiety and why we're in such a regulatory fatigue state is because it's taken away a lot of our uncertainty. Let me give you an example of that. So let's say you've got you go to the grocery store. Like I'm a pretty good grocery store shopper before all this stuff happened. So when I would go to Kroger, that's my local grocery store, I would go in and I had a good system and I had an app that I would use. So I felt pretty comfortable about my ability to shop in the store. And I was so used to it and the patterns were so recognizable that when I would go through the store, it may only, like on a scale of 1 to 100, it may only require 30% of my mental energy. So I'm able to go through, think about other things, because I know what aisles to go through. I know how my app works. I know how to check out. I have my Kroger card, all that stuff. So my neurological load is low when I go to shop at Kroger. Now, nowadays, when I go to Kroger, it's a little more complicated. There's more things to account for, but the patterns aren't as recognizable. I got to wipe off the cart. I've got to wear a mask. I've got to social distance. I got to stand on the stickers when I'm checking out. So now I'm not saying these things are bad. I'm just saying these things are a new part of the pattern that now I have to account for. So what used to be a 30% mental energy activity now is a 60% mental energy activity. And that 60% mental energy activity means when I'm in the store, I can't really think about other things as much because I'm so preoccupied with navigating this new environment. And when I leave the store, my energy level's lower. So what we want folks to realize is what COVID and any kind of stressor, but specifically relating to COVID, what it's done is it's increased the regulatory capacity on everybody, which then decreases the amount of neurological things we have available to us. So another thing I'll talk about is the idea of plexiglass. Now, I always want to make this point. It's not, listen, I get why it's there. It makes perfect sense. But you have to understand subconsciously what your brain's doing with something like plexiglass. When I look at plexiglass, the only reason why plexiglass is there is to protect one thing from another or both things from each other. So the whole point of that is when you see plexiglass, even though there's a very nice person that's a Walmart person behind the plexiglass, your brain says this could be a potentially dangerous situation, and that's why this plexiglass is here. Again, adding to the neurological load that situations we have now. So what were easy activities before now have a higher neurological load. And what makes stress unique, and if you go back to our freshman biology definition of what stress is, it's anything that disrupts homeostasis. So it's anything that throws us off balance. And it can be something positive or negative. The negative things, though, the key thing when you start looking at stress we have to consider is these three elements. Does it cause a physiological response? Is it perceived as aversive? And does the person feel control? Now, the most important one of that, though, is the control element. So let me give you an example. Me giving this presentation could be viewed as a negative stressor. Does it cause a physiological response? Absolutely. Can it be perceived as aversive? Absolutely. Do I feel control? I have a level of control. So the negative stress value of me giving this presentation isn't super high. It's high enough, trust me. But when I compare it to, like, say, for example, a child who is being physically abused, physiological response? Absolutely. Perceived as aversive? Absolutely. Does a child feel control? Little to none. So when we start talking about stress, we just can't talk about stress in this generally ambiguous way, because there's different things that make stress more or less difficult and more or less impactful on our psychology. And there's some things, and if you get a chance, there's a great speaker, or a great, he's not just a speaker, he's an author, he's a brilliant person, Bruce Perry. And he talks about big T and little t, the big T being trauma, the little t being toxic stress. But when he talks about, and we'll unpack trauma in just a second, toxic stress, the way you can kind of think of toxic stress beyond just regular negative stress, toxic stress is like, you know, that kid that you work with whose life is just exhausting. You know, that kid who, it's not necessarily that they're being abused, or they're being neglected. It's they don't know if they're staying at grandma's house that week, or dad's house that week, or mom's house that week, or if mom's boyfriend's going to be there because he's kind of a jerk, or are they going to have any money when their friends go out this weekend to eat, because he always is embarrassed because he doesn't have money. So it's not necessarily that stress is traumatic, but it's just exhausting. It's that the part of this definition I love is with a failure of the body to recover fully. So it's that you can't catch a breath. And I think that's where this is coming from a lot for us right now with the COVID planning and education, after school programming, is it's just changing so much. We can't seem to quite catch our breath sometimes. And that's why we can enter into, again, this more intensive state of regulatory fatigue. And I think a lot of parents are experiencing this because of uncertainty around things. It's this we can't seem to catch our breath, because the moment you think you've got things a little bit more, things navigated slightly, then it gets you again. So I want you to think about that idea of toxic stress. But there's also this idea of trauma. Now, okay, my definition of trauma is extreme deviation from an expected pattern that overwhelms the individual's capacity to cope. So the big part of that definition that I want you to see is an extreme deviation from an expected pattern. So let me give you an example, a pretty intense example. A child who loses, like, their parent in a car wreck at, like, let's say 13 or 12 years old. That child, again, we know the brain's a pattern-seeking device. So that child has noticed the patterns. My dad's been here since I was a baby. My dad takes me to school. My dad goes on vacation. And then also what they can do, this is another part that's really interesting that the brain can do, it can look at other people's lives, okay? It looks at other people's lives and says, oh, you know what? Based on what those people are experiencing, my dad's probably going to be in my life when I get older too. So this kid's got, let's say it's a metaphorical road. So they're driving down this metaphorical road. They've been on the road for a while, so they have a good sense of how it's going to go. They can look forward through other people's eyes and have a sense of where it's going in the future. But what trauma is, now, let me say this real quick. Trauma is an unbelievably complicated concept, and there's all different types of trauma. So I'm summarizing for the sake of a 50-minute presentation. There's chemical trauma, physical trauma, psychological trauma, but I'm zeroing in to communicate this as clearly as possible in a lot of time. So the kid's driving down this psychological road, right? And then they have this collision with this event, which is his father dying in a car accident. Now what happens is that kid is now pushed to a whole different road, a whole different future that is scary and overwhelming. Why? Because they don't know what to expect. Why? Because they don't have a pattern to tell them how to predict that kind of future. Excuse me. So what happens a lot of times with people in that kind of trauma is they have a disorienting phase. They're disoriented. Why? Because I'm on this scary road. I have no idea how to be on it. And a lot of times what we're doing in therapy, and this isn't turning on therapy, but a lot of times what we're doing with therapy is we're trying to help that person learn to navigate this new road. So trauma is significant, right? The nature of it is significant. It's an extreme deviation. the SAMHSA does a great job of their definition of trauma having these three elements, which is this event, which is what happened to the individual. The experience is the event's interaction with the personal variables, okay? Things like developmental stage, psychology, physiology, the history that person's experienced. And then the effect is the impact the experience has had on the individual's mental and physical functioning and their interpretation of the world. So somebody asked me this question: Jim, has COVID been traumatic for everybody? And I would answer that question in two parts. One being, has it been traumatic to society? Yes. It has been an extreme deviation from an expected pattern for society. So yes, it has been traumatic at this macro societal level. The micro level, the individual level, I think you have to take into account the 3 E's. You have to take into event, experience, and effect. I think, let me give you my house as an example. I do not believe COVID's been traumatic for my home. I believe that would be a dramatic exaggeration. Why? Because I work at Marshall University. I was able to continue to work through the pandemic. I was able to work from home when I needed to. They provide a safe environment for me to work in now when I'm on campus. And I continue to get paid through the pandemic. My wife is a principal of an elementary school. She was able to continue to work. She continued to get paid, and she's returned to work now, and her job is very secure. My boys are 10 and 13. They're able to supervise themselves for appropriate amounts of time for appropriate activities. So has COVID been disruptive to my home? Yes. Has it been traumatic? I think it would be an exaggeration. However, I do have friends of mine where the experience has been traumatic, meaning I have a friend of mine who's a barber. There was a number of months he couldn't work. He was having to take out a savings that he was not planning on taking out of in order just to keep his business afloat. And he's continuing, and he's in a pretty deep hole right now trying to get out of those things. So to say that my experience and his experience is the same thing is overly dramatic. And also too, I want you to think about this with the students that are coming into your programs. Too often, we almost awfulize everything. Like, oh my gosh, there's this gigantic wave of mental health in kids coming with this pandemic. Now, do I believe that we've had kids in home environments that have been experiencing high levels of trauma that are going to come in with higher level needs than they would have? Absolutely. But do I believe every child has been traumatized by COVID? No, it's an exaggeration. I think there's kids that have extreme high levels of trauma, and there's kids who've been playing Fortnite since March. And when we dramatize, generally, we deplete the energy we can use specifically. So I want us to really be thoughtful of the nuance in that, because when we dramatize and when trauma wears us down, when toxic stress wears us down, the worst thing that can happen is we enter into this state called learned helplessness, which is this belief that your behavior doesn't matter. It's this belief that no matter what you do, it's a victim mindset. And I don't want to use victim mindset as a choice, because I think learned helplessness is a very complicated concept. And it's not always that people are choosing to be helpless. It's they have learned to be helpless through the experiences they've had in their life. So it's the first place when we start talking about stress and self-care is, are you good at recognizing that in you? Because now we got to start talking about what we're going to do about it. Now, okay, we know all this stuff about stress. Jim, that's great. Trauma, toxic stress. Yeah, that's great. But now what? Now what are you going to do? Now I'm just overwhelmed because you just told me why I'm feeling so worried and I'm feeling so tired and all this. But what? Tell me more. So here's the thing. The first part of any effective self-care is getting focused. And what does getting focused mean? It means controlling the controllables. Or the Serenity Prayer is an example of that. Knowledge and wisdom know the difference, and the courage to face the things you can't. Control the controllables. When I was a therapist for a long time in a private practice and also in community-based mental health. And one of the exercises that I would use for folks when they said, "Oh, I'm stressed," I'm like, "Oh, okay, let's unpack your stress." So with stress, I would make a big T chart, and I put on one side control, and I put on the other side can't control. And I'm saying, "Tell me something you're stressed about." And they'd say, "I'm stressed about this. Can you control that?" No. I'd write on the can't control side. All right, tell me something else. I'm stressed about this. Okay, I'll write on this side. And then we would go through, and I would say, now that you've got this populated of control and can't control, talk to me about how much energy you're spending on the can't control side. And not always, but there was multiple situations where people were able to show gosh, I spend a lot of energy thinking about things I can't control. I spend a lot of time. So the first thing, this, in my opinion, would be a great start for folks to look at, are you focusing? If you're talking about self-care, do you do a good job of inventorying the controllables and how much energy you are? And I've even looked at people to say, give me a percentage. Tell me how much the percentage you're on control versus controllables or uncontrollables, and looking at that. And a big part of that, and this is just, I also think it's important with teaming right now, is this idea of whenever we're talking about addressing our issues, are we complaining towards excuses? Okay. So when someone's complaining towards excuses, what they're doing is they're giving reasons why they can't. Or are we processing towards problem solving, which is getting a better understanding to figure out what we can do. So I think that's a really critical thing when we start, if we're helping each other and we're helping our teams and are helping the young people and the families we work with, is listening for the difference between complaining towards excuses, which is why not, versus processing towards problem solving, which is how. So really digging into that. Now, here's my soapbox for just a second about self-care. I think we've gotten a little bit derailed with self-care. I mean, not derailed, simplified with self-care. A lot of people think, oh, self-care, yeah, that's about escape and taking walks and warm baths. Now, listen, I'm not saying that taking walks and warm baths are bad. I'm not telling you that. But to me, and this is as I've spent more time thinking about this and writing about this and reading about this, I think if that's what we think self-care is, it's an overly simplified and selfish example of what self-care is about. Self-care is not just about relaxation. Self-care is about optimization. Self-care is about what do you do on a daily basis that increases your effectiveness, that increases your ability to do the work that the world needs you to do. And I think that's a really that to me is more powerful than I need to escape the world because I deserve self-care. Now, and I'm not trying to be harsh, to be rude. I'm trying to be focused about what we should be thinking about. Now, is there a place for relaxation and self-care? Absolutely. I believe that wholeheartedly. I believe there's a time to watch a Netflix video. I believe there's a time for a warm bath. I believe in that, but I don't believe that the end goal of self-care is to escape from responsibility. The end goal of self-care is to arrive at responsibility with the highest level of ability and functioning and effectiveness. So we're going to talk about two key parts of that. The two key parts of that are energy management and resilience development. So the first one is energy management. Now these are related, obviously, because they can't be completely separated. Energy management is about what do you do on a daily basis to, one, be aware of your energetic capacity, what you have left, right? And then what do you do to protect your energy, to make sure that you are, first of all, not letting things take your energy without your permission, and two, what are you doing to make sure you are refilling your tank, so to speak, to keep your energy at an effective level through the day? Those are the two things I want you to think about. And so we start looking at that. The first thing I said was, are you good at understanding where you are in your regulatory capacity? So are you self-aware about where you are in your energy? So do you know when your tank is low? And the one thing we start talking about is this idea of HALT. Now, anybody from the recovery community has probably heard HALT. HALT means hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. Okay? Hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. So what the recovery community talks about is when you are in a HALT state, you're more likely to relapse because you are neurologically more vulnerable. Now, I had a second L in there, and it is hungry, angry, lonely, late, and tired. And the reason why I add late in there is because some of my worst parenting has been done when I'm late. So what does this mean? So why is HALT important? First and foremost, are you good at recognizing when you're in a HALT state? Are you thoughtful of when you're in a HALT state? There's a great Brene Brown, who's just an absolutely fantastic author and just a really cool person. If you haven't read any of her books, you got to read some of her books. Watch her Netflix thing. She's just fantastic. Her and her husband have a really cool thing where when they come home, if one of them's in a HALT state or if one of them's in a depleted neurological state, they'll say, listen, I'm at 20% right now. I had a hard day at work. Don't have much left. we're going to have to order out food, and I really need you to take care of the kids. That's where self-awareness is applied, okay? That's where we're thoughtful of, where am I in this state? So the goal is, are you self-aware? And Daniel Goleman talks a lot about this when he released Emotional Intelligence years and years ago. But are you good at recognizing your own whole state and working to solve that, or removing yourself from high-level neurological situations? And how good are you at communicating that to others, and, acknowledging that in other people? So first step in energy management, understanding where you are. Second step, managing your psychic RAM. So psychic RAM, computer's not as much as it used to be. Used to be like if you had like 4 windows open, the whole computer would slow down. Why? Because RAM, which is random access memory, there's only so much the computer can hold in its attention span, will be the way to think about it. So are you doing a good job of managing the energy of your RAM? Are you doing a good job of deciding what is allowed in your consciousness? So the way I like to talk about this is, if we would agree that you are what you eat physically, and then take that and generally apply that to you are what you eat intellectually and emotionally. If you took a food log of a day, what are you taking in? What are you ingesting? Okay, and how much is that a conscious choice, and how much is that where the environment is telling you what to take in? So, like, for example, let me give you a couple examples. The news. I don't have a problem with the news. I watch the news. I watch the local news at night, and I watch the national news at night. But I think, and I'm not saying that's the best and everybody should do it that way. I'm just saying that's my arrangement. What I don't do is watch news 24/7. I tell news where it belongs in my psychology. I tell the news when it will have my attention. The same thing goes with social media, okay? Does social media, how much of that are you taking in, and how much does that impact you are what you eat? Do you tell social media when you interact with it, or does the notifications on your screen tell you when to interact with social media? How much control over your own psychology are you taking, right? Are you using social media as a scheduled escape at times in your day? Or is it something that you're constantly fighting and arguing with people politically on social platforms? So again, it's about owning your RAM, deciding what gets your consciousness, what gets those things. Another great strategy that I don't know if we always utilize at the highest level is certainty anchors. So certainty anchors is a behavioral concept of what are the things that go through your day that give your day a sense of structure, that give your day a sense, a grounding, so to speak. Now, why do I have a picture of sardines? Just my example. Again, I'm not saying my example is the right example. It's just the way that I apply it in my life happens to work for me. Why I have sardines is because every day during the work week, and even sometimes on weekends, I eat the same thing for lunch. I have sardines, I have macadamia nuts or walnuts, a beef jerky stick, and usually a Diet Mountain Dew every day for lunch. And here's why. Because I don't necessarily need to have a culinary adventure every day for lunch. I need certain calories so I don't fall asleep after lunch to maintain my level of functioning. Now, somebody else may want that. That's completely fine. But that's something I decide I will take off of my neurological load. I'm going to take that out of my neurological load because I don't want to worry about my lunch, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to order bulk sardines, bulk macadamia nuts, and bulk beef jerky sticks from Amazon, and I'm going to get me a big old thing of Diet Mountain Dew, and every day that is taken care of. So now I get that energy back to dedicate towards talking to you. I get that energy back toward developing other presentations. What's another example of that where you don't have to eat sardines? Another example of that would be laying your clothes out before you go to bed. Now, people, oh, no, that makes sense. So, we talk about kids should do it and how important it is, but how often do we give advice we don't take? Why is laying out your clothes a really huge thing? Here's why. Because one of the reasons, psychologically speaking, when you go to bed and you lay out your clothes, you are already purposely engaging the next day. You are saying, I got you tomorrow, and I'm ready. This is what I'm going to show up to rock out tomorrow in, this right here. Now, you get up, you get ready, you get going. if you don't lay out your clothes, and some people this may not be an issue, but for some people it might be an issue. If you don't lay out your clothes, you get up the next morning, you're trying on five, six different shirts, and I'll use myself. If you're trying on multiple outfits, I doubt it's because they all look so awesome you can't decide which one to wear, right? But it's because, oh, I don't like this one, oh, I don't like this color, oh, my pants don't look right, oh, it's got a stain on it. So now your neurological load for getting ready just increased. Your time, the likelihood of you being late now just increased, and you potentially could even have a self-deprecating experience. So now you get in the car, you're late, right? You're irritated, not feeling great about yourself. So you have already taken your gas tank to below half tank before you ever have interacted with another human. That's where certain anchors come in. Now, I'm not going to spend too much time on some of these other ones, but the idea of exercise, why does exercise work? Exercise works for two reasons. One reason that it works, a bunch of reasons, but I'll simplify. One reason that it works is it helps to flush out stress hormones, cortisol, adrenaline, norepinephrine. Moving your body increases your heart rate, and the book Brain Rules talks about it's the hazmat team and the wait staff. So it comes in, it flushes out the bad stuff, brings in the good stuff. So it actually makes your body in a less toxic state. Another thing that it does for you is as movement happens, your focus and everything else gets aligned, and you get this sense of I am purposefully engaging with the world. Let me give you an example. When you decide to take the stairs, what you're saying is, I could take the elevator, but I decide, so I'm owning my psychology and my body, I decide to take the stairs. The mistake people make is they think that exercise is about joining a CrossFit gym and doing 13 muscle-ups and pulling a hamstring. That's not what it's about. What it's about is I decide to own my psychology. I decide to own my physiology, right? And again, this is where I'm at with my life. Exercise and lifting and things like that for me isn't about being on the cover of Muscle and Fitness, because that's never going to happen. It's about optimal performance and how that factors in. Real quick, if you haven't looked into things like meditation, you need to. Meditation is purposefully taking ownership of your psychology. I've been a terrible meditator, but I meditate about 5 days a week, somewhere between 4 and 5 days a week. I encourage people using apps, the Waking Up app, the Calm app. There's lots of really cool apps. And don't get caught up in all this stuff like, oh, you got to go to a 16-week course and you got to, stare at a candle for 6 hours and sit crisscross applesauce or all that kind of stuff. It's about pause. That's what it is for me. Meditation is about pause. In case you can't tell, my mind moves pretty quick sometimes. I'm not always saying it moves quick to do great things, but it moves a lot. So that pause helps me to focus, helps me to get dialed in. I really think that's a critical thing. Another thing we'll talk about strategy-wise is this bottom-up approach. If you haven't read some of the stuff or watched some great YouTube videos from David Allen from what's called the GTD method or Getting Things Done method, want a great strategy to kind of break yourself loose and get some energy back, find something mundane it's been bugging you, cleaning the garage, cleaning out a junk drawer, cleaning out a closet. I'm sure some of you guys did this during when we were all quarantined or whatever, is you clean out a closet and you just feel like this burst of energy. Why? Because you're effective. And that thing now is out of your RAM. It's out of your system. Another thing we know is effective is exercising signature strengths. We know people that have crafts and hobbies and things like that. Why does signature strengths work? Because they give you an activity that makes you feel competent. And as you feel more competent, then you have more energy. So when you're looking at, if you've got big tasks, I've been doing this because I got about 6 different webinars I'm taken care of right now, but I have had to schedule my situation to go, all right, I'm going to work for this amount of time. I'm going to do this signature strength to get some energy back. I'm going to do these specific tasks to get some energy back. And I'm going to get back into the work. So I'm constantly trying to keep an eye on where my tank is and how to navigate that. The most important energy management strategy you can use is deep social networks. Understanding that relationships, there's a term, I look it up and I won't give too much of it. I saw this on a Netflix special I was watching, Ubuntu. I've said that right, Ubuntu. It's an African word, okay? And it talks about, just look it up. It talks about the importance of us. It talks about how the us gives us energy, how these deep social networks give us a sense of protection and support. So when you're looking at energy management and relationships and deep social networks, who your who is, who your when is, and who your where is critical for you, for the young people we serve, and it actually has physical repairing value. The ComConnect system is the anti-fight or flight system. So if you want your body to recover from all the stress or trauma that you experienced, we want to get into this ComConnect state. The ComConnect state is where the body builds and broadens. So it builds and repairs, and it broadens and explores. And we know, like, if you look up ComConnect system, oxytocin, things like that, you'll get a lot of good information. Again, I'm trying to give you some ideas so that way you start thinking about these things. You go, I want to learn more about this, or I want to learn more about that, or that what he was talking about with the three E's or whatever it might be. Now, the last part is resiliency development. So this, to me, it's kind of on the same continuum as energy management, but it's different enough that it deserves its own section. So energy management is about, how do I watch my tank, right? How do I make sure when I'm getting empty, I get a little bit more back in there? And how do I make sure I'm not burning my energy on stuff like 24-hour news that I'm watching or social media all the time? So resiliency development is this last part of the APA's definition of how important resilience is to discover. It's as much about bouncing back, but it can also involve profound growth. So what this means is how do we increase the capacity of our tank? How do we become more capable? How do we become more resilient? So like something that last year would have completely depleted my tank, this year I can handle it. Why? Because I've been doing things, I've been purposely working on my physiology and psychology to be more effective because I've got a bigger tank now. What used to bother me last year doesn't bother me the way it did before. That's what we're talking about with resiliency development. And honestly, this isn't an ACEs talk or whatever. When we start looking at building young people or building individuals who've experienced trauma, this is one of those things we're trying to do, is increase their capacity to engage the world. So that's what we're talking about. Now, I love teaching it this way, which is about rational optimism. Now, I got this term is from Sean Acor, but there's multiple people that talk about it in different ways. And what rational optimism is, well, let me differentiate it this way. Learned helplessness, we talked about in the beginning, which was the belief that your behavior doesn't matter. So it's like, it's that, and I remember I said, it's not necessarily victim state as in the person chooses to be a victim. It's their experiences have facilitated a mindset where they don't believe their behavior is going to matter anymore. So, or doesn't matter anymore. So what I'm talking about is not that optimism is this all half empty, half full kind of idea. Rational optimism is this concept of not is the glass half empty, half full, but where can I get more water? Where effort equals outcome. Then we start developing resiliency and resiliency development. What resiliency is now what? I'm popping up. I went down, I'm popping up. Now what? My behavior matters. There's something I can do about this. There's something I can do about my stress. There's something I can do about my trauma, or there's something I can do about my situation. I know my controllables, go back to the very beginning. I know my controllables, right? And I know that there's things that I'm going to do about my controllables that will impact the nature of those stressors. And I take this from probably one of the greatest philosophers of the 1990s, Lloyd Christmas, right? If you haven't seen Dumb and Dumber, you got to see it. Cinematic masterpiece. Lloyd Christmas and Harry were following Mary Swanson through the whole movie. Lloyd's infatuated with Mary Swanson. Finally gets in front of her at the end of the movie and looks at her and he says, what's the chance? He professes his love to her and says, what's the chances we're going to end up together? And she says, it's not good. And he says, like 1 in 100? And she says, more like 1 in a million. And Lloyd looks at her and says, so you're telling me there's a chance? Now, I know that sounds like a naive kind of approach, but what I'm interested in is resiliency development is finding that chance. Rational optimism, where do I get more water? The way we develop that kind of mindset, and you can also look in, I use the word mindset because it makes sense. Carol Dweck's work around mindset, Angela Duckworth's work around grit, critical information when we start looking at these things, that stress equals growth. So we purposely say, I will purposely bring challenge into my life, right, in order to make myself more capable and stronger. We look at what are the things you're doing in a day-to-day basis. If you want to build your resilience, and we're not, again, self-care is not about escapes. Self-care is about optimization. I always ask kids this: what'd you do that's hard today? And you know what's interesting to me, when I ask kids about that, people are like, yeah, that's good, man. Kids should learn how to do things that are hard. But then when I ask that of adults, like, what'd you do that was hard today? And don't tell me you just went to work. Like, what was something you did that you chose hard? That hard didn't choose you. You chose hard. Was it an exercise? Was it an extreme experience? Was it some sort of hobby that you try? Are you learning new things? I think it's so powerful for kids to see us engage in hard things. It's so powerful for kids to see us do those kinds of things. And looking at, when you look at your day, and we'll kind of wrap up with this, is if you want to actively engage in true self-care, then you say, what does it mean for me to win the day? What does it mean for me? Do I have goals? Do I look at what it means to win the day? Am I managing my energy? Am I developing my resilience, right? What is it? What does today look like? And I know it sounds cheesy, but I'm down with cheesy, right? There's too many people that are zombieing it, walking around. But what does it mean to win the day? You know, one of the things I go through every morning is my core 4, right? I go through, what does it mean? What are the things I want to do today to win my day from a body standpoint? You know, and again, I'm not telling you I'm trying to get on the cover of Muscle and Fitness. I'm trying to just make sure I'm fighting off diabetes and heart disease, right? Relationships. What am I going to do today to focus on relationships? Mind. What am I going to do today to keep my mind sharp and get my mind stronger? Business. What am I going to do today that's going to make business, what am I going to do today to win the day in business? Like today, this was my circle the calendar. I'm going to rock this thing out from 11 to 12. That's winning the day from a business standpoint. Body, I'm going to run on the elliptical this morning. I'll do a little lifting this afternoon. Relationships, be thoughtful and kind with the people that I'm interacting with today. And when the evening comes, I'll make sure my kids know that I'm listening to them. What am I doing with the mind? I'm doing my meditation. I'm doing my Elevate lessons. I'm going to journal. And then I'm also going to read for 30 minutes tonight. So looking at what it means to win the day. Again, so it may sound cheesy, and I'm not telling you that the way I do it's perfect. What I've done, I've borrowed from other people. But what we know when we start talking about positive emotion pushing us forward, is this incentive reward system. That there's an element of satiation in reward systems. And what that means is, satiation is whenever you eat chocolate cake and you feel satiated or satisfied, and you're consuming something, or when you're laying in the bath and you have a relaxation. That's a satiating feeling. That's a comforting feeling. There's another side that I think we need to spend some time thinking about, which is this incentive reward system, which is the positive emotion you experience when you're moving towards something worth doing. And I think that's the other side of self-care that I'd like you to think about. That's the other side of self-care, that it's not about getting away from stuff. So we got to make sure we're not complaining towards excuses, but we're processing towards problem solving and figuring out what it is we can do to be more effective. Why? Because it's not about escaping responsibility or escaping our stressors, although that can be a part of getting you that relief and getting you that relaxation and recharging your batteries. But it's about we recharge our batteries to be at our fullest capacity, so that way that we can take on the responsibility that the world is asking of us. So really fast, I'm 3 minutes over. I really, really, really appreciate this opportunity to be a part and wrap up this conference. I hope the information was valuable to you. Absolutely can't thank enough the folks with David and Susan and Sherry and all the people with the Department of Ed for the opportunity and their collaboration with us at the Autism Training Center and our Behavior and Mental Health Technical Assistance Center. So thanks, guys. Appreciate the opportunity.
41 and 42. Okay. All right. Gosh, Jim, that was absolutely fantastic.
Thanks, Dave.
Phew, I'm telling you, I'm just I've got some things written down, and I love, don't let things take your energy without your permission. Gosh, that is so good. We're guilty of that, and win the day. Getting up in the morning and deciding to win the day. All right, I got a couple questions for you. If we want to begin to optimize ourselves, where should we begin?
Yeah. I think the first thing is looking at what's taking your energy without your permission is a good place to start. I think that control, the control category and the uncontrolled, controlling the controllables exercise is a good place to start. I think the first thing you do is start by not letting things take your energy without permission. And then that frees up some energy that you might need to do some things that we talked about. One thing I think that people do, first of all, is they're unrealistic with their expectations. Oh, I'm going to work out 5 days a week for 75 minutes, and then they don't do it the first day, and they say I'm a failure, and they don't follow through. I think it's start small, but first start with the things that are taking your energy without your permission, and then get some small wins. So that would be my suggestion: is you start with the control the controllables exercise, and then work toward looking at some of those specific strategies and where they might fit. That would be my suggestion.
Very good. Second question. Are there some resources you'd recommend for us to get started on optimizing ourselves?
Sure. For me, there's a lot of really cool, there's tons and tons and tons of books about these things. I love anything that Sean Acor does. He's got some good stuff. The Happiness Advantage is really cool. Before Happiness is a really cool book that he did. And again, some of that stuff, you got to take bits and pieces of it. David Allen, as I mentioned, Getting Things Done. If you're struggling with task management, that can be a challenge. Those are those things you can kind of start with. There's tons. What I love is I love podcasts too, man. There's a lot of really great podcasts. One of the ones I like is Tim Ferriss. Tim Ferriss has a great podcast, and what I've learned a lot from is he interviews like these super highly successful folks in a variety of different fields, and he starts learning about their habits. And that's where a lot of my habits have come from, is basically stealing them from people that were already battle tested. And anything like that. And one thing that I like to do is I like to find downtime and insert things like podcasts, audiobooks, at times like driving back and forth to work, driving when I'm traveling, getting ready in the morning. I like to fill that space with content. Those are some of the things I use.
Pretty good.
No more questions.
Yeah, let's see. I've got one in the chat here.
Okay.
If you have additional resources for teenagers with autism during this time, high functioning, I'd love to utilize it. Is there someone I can contact concerning this?
Yeah, me. Yeah, you can contact
Jim
me.
Harris. Yeah.
Yeah, call me.
Listen,
I'm happy.
I've worked with Jim way before even 21st Century and before this, TBIS. This is the man you want to get in touch with. I'll tell you that. I'll sing his praises right now, because when people stay on to listen to the very last person the way they did in the comments that were made in the chat, you definitely are a rock star.
Wow. Listen, I love getting to work with folks I get to work with. And David, I love that that you guys are still thinking I have something to talk about. And I take it seriously. I take it seriously. And we're all doing this work together. We're all trying to figure out what we can do. And yeah, if anybody has specific questions around autism, I tell you, our Autism Training Center, we really are doing some great stuff these days. We have been doing it for a number of years, but we got a ton of resources from our YouTube pages to our social media. We've got our college program for individuals with autism. We've got some great resources. Happy to help anybody we can. We're doing some great stuff with the ATC. And if you have some specific questions around positive behavior support, how we're supporting schools with trauma and mental health, our Behavior and Mental Health Technical Assistance Center, like I said, which is made possible by the Department of Education, folks in David's office and the Susan Beck's Office of Special Education. We're doing some great stuff with them as well.
I'm going to put your contact in the chat real quick.
Okay.
For everyone. And there it is. Okay.
And I sent Sherry a PDF version of the PowerPoint as well.
Okay. It's in the chat, she said.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Great.
Rock. Okay. Any other questions before we close? I think everybody wants you to stay another hour, Jim.
Oh, hey,
So,
I love this stuff. This is game day to me. This is fun.
Yeah.
It's fun.
Well, you got your Marshall shirt on. You're ready to go.
That's right.
Go Herd.
That's right. Go Herd.
Yes, we can get this recorded. Yes, all this will be recorded, which I'll do this. Well, let's see. Any other questions? Yep. All right. Well, Jim, I want to thank you personally. This was fantastic. I don't know a better way to end it than what you gave us here to think about all these situations here. So We appreciate it. You can get a copy of the slides. Everything will be put up, as I want to mention here in just a moment. But special kudos to you, Jim, for just a great presentation there. All right.
Thanks for making me part of the team, Dave. Appreciate it.
All right. As I mentioned earlier, the exhibit hall and virtual library and public forum are open for the next 2 weeks for you to return and learn. The slides up. Take a few minutes to complete the conference survey. The slide's up now. It's displayed on the screen. And for any West Virginia wanting STARS credit, you must complete the survey and add your name to it. Okay. We want to thank our sponsors, Mango Math, Charles Mott Foundation, Stemfinity. I want to thank our co-hosts in Kentucky, Indiana, and Tennessee. I want to thank everyone, and there is no way I can name everyone who was involved putting this together. But we definitely want to thank everyone that worked behind the scenes, and you know who you are, because all I am is the guinea pig to end it up. And this was a great production that was put on by a lot of people who worked extremely hard on it. And I want to thank all of you for that. Well, we want you to enjoy your day, and we hope to see you next year in person in Tennessee. And I'm assuming it's probably going to be possibly in Chattanooga. And Janelle, if I'm wrong, you can tell me and we'll correct that. But thank you for attending the conference. We thank you for everything, and we want you to have a great rest of the day. Thanks a lot.